Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Eric May, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next live presentation from Vizsla Copper Corp. Before I introduce our speaker, please note, you can submit your questions for the presenter in the question box to the left of the slides. Additionally, all of today's presentations will be recorded and available for 24/7 replay. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Craig Perry, Executive Chairman of Vizsla Copper Corp, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol VCUFF and also on the TSXV under the symbol VCU. Welcome, Craig.
Hey, Eric. Good morning. How are you? Look, thank you for joining us today. What I want to talk about is something extraordinary. I want to tell you about a once-in-a-century opportunity that markets are presenting with us today. And so I want to talk about the copper market. It's one of my favorite things. It's it's the metal with a PhD, and one of the very, very best ways to play what is going to be the most extraordinary boom coming up. And then we'll talk a little bit about Vizsla Copper and the opportunity that presents. And it's, of course, one way of playing in the extraordinary market that is the copper market and the coming boom for copper. So Vizsla Copper, we spun Vizsla Copper out of Vizsla Silver a year ago. Vizsla Silver is a company down in Mexico that we've taken from a $5 million market cap to about a $300 million market capitalization today. We've got a track record of doing that over the past 20 years in the resource space, and that's what we're looking to do with Vizsla Copper. And I think when you see what we have here and the latest news from the company, I think you'll see the opportunity. There are, of course, a few forward-looking statements coming up. So we need to include these disclaimers, but please go online and look at our website if you need any more details there. Now, before we get into a bit more detail about Vizsla Copper, I just want to talk to you about the copper market. Now, I've never seen a setup in the resource sector like this so clearly in my life. The opportunity is absolutely tremendous. Of course, we're going through a fundamental transformation in the way the planet we use materials, we transport materials, we transport people, and that move is tantamount to what we saw 120 years ago with the move away from horse and buggy into and animal-based transport into vehicles powered by hydrocarbons. And of course, there wasn't much. If you go back to the turn of the last century, there wasn't much hydrocarbon production at all. And then we went through the most massive boom the world's ever seen. And some of the world's biggest companies, of course, companies like Saudi Aramco, Chevron and the like, grew into some of the biggest companies in the world. I think we're about to see the same thing happen in copper. And it's not just me saying this. We saw as late as 2 days ago, the head of copper in Glencore talking about the extraordinary gap in supply-demand gap emerging. And now we've seen this supply-demand gap emerge in the past. Over the next 7 years, the world's going to be a net deficit by about 50 million tonnes of copper. So if you go back to the last boom, and the last copper boom, the last boom for metals between 2000 and 2012, was really driven by a fairly localised factor, and that localised factor was the urbanisation of a vast chunk of China's populace. What we're talking about now, this move towards electrification and batteries and battery metals, that's a global phenomenon. So instead of only being 1.5 billion people that are driving this change in supply-demand dynamics, it's the entire 8 billion people on the planet that are going to be demanding more battery metals and particularly copper. So, and if you go back to that last phase, from 2000 to 2007, we saw that copper demand increase from about 15 million tonnes per annum over that time to just under 20 million tonnes per annum. So you saw an increase of about 25% in copper demand. What we're seeing and what Glencore was saying earlier this week is that over the next 7 years, there's going to be a deficit of about 50 million tonnes of copper. So on average, about 7 million tonnes of copper per annum. So we're moving from a market that presently is about 21 million tonnes of production all the way up to about 27 million tonnes of production. So another 7 million tonnes of demand per annum by the back end of this decade. We've got no idea where that copper is going to come from. At the moment, of course, we've seen a dramatic underinvestment over the last 10 years in the copper space, an underinvestment in exploration, and certainly an underinvestment in development. So the scene is set, the field is sowed and ploughed and sowed for an incredible increase in demand for copper and copper price. And of course, if you go back to between 2000 and 2012, that 25% increase in copper demand drove the copper price from when I started at Rio Tinto as a young lad, as a geologist in the field with Rio Tinto. We were using 71 cents per pound copper in all of our models. Between that time and now, the copper price increased to nearly $5. So the metal price alone was a five-bagger. This time round, the demand for copper is increasing to such an extent that I ask the question, will we see something similar here? An increase from, copper price has done pretty well here in the past week. We're trading at about $3.80 a pound. Could we see $15 or $20 per pound copper? Now, people will talk about substitution and the like, but of course, it takes many, many years to build equipment, vehicles and the like to actually substitute for copper. So I think we're actually going to see $15 or $20 per pound copper over the next few years. And that will be extraordinary. And what that will do is float, the rising tide floats all boats. I think every single copper project on the planet will become coveted and prices will increase dramatically. Now, you set that against a backdrop of very underinvestment in the sector. I think the mining and exploration sector are trading at historical lows, particularly when compared to, say, the NASDAQ or the broader markets. And so the opportunity in our space is phenomenal. And I don't think we've seen, that, of course, that last boom from 2000 to 2012, phenomenal boom, great fortunes were made over that time. I think this one's going to be bigger and better. And my recommendation to everyone is put your foot on as many pounds of copper as you possibly can, and as many pounds of nickel and any other battery metal that you possibly can, and be ready for what is going to be one of the greatest wealth creation events the planet's ever seen. And so with that as the backdrop, I just want to touch on what we're doing at Vizsla Copper. Of course, we love copper markets. We love exploration. We've been very fortunate over the past 15 years to have been involved in some amazing discoveries. For example, I was the co-founder of NextGen Energy. We discovered the Arrow deposit. We took NextGen from a $15 million market cap when we started that company in 2010 to now it's about a $3.5 billion company. So good exploration work can generate extraordinary value and extraordinary returns for investors. And that's what we're looking to do here in Vizsla Copper with our copper and gold projects in central British Columbia. So we're in British Columbia. Our projects are in British Columbia. We've got a couple of earlier stage projects, Carruthers Pass and Blueberry, which we think have very, very good exploration potential, albeit that they're very early stage. But what we've just done and announced in the past month is a merger with Consolidated Woodjam. The Consolidated Woodjam projects are in central British Columbia, and we'll get into a little bit more detail there. But I've very rarely seen a package of properties and projects that have such phenomenal potential. Our projects are in central British Columbia, very close to the regional centre of Williams Lake. We have tremendous access from major highways and roads crisscrossing the property. We're in a known porphyry district. There are a number of mines surrounding us, including the Gibraltar mine and the massive Mount Polly mine, world-class mines. And our property, whilst it's seen some exploration. It hasn't been completely and thoroughly explored yet. But where there has been drilling on our project, some phenomenal discoveries have been made. And I think it's very important to note that we, off the back of this transaction, we end up with 1.7 billion pounds of copper at pretty good grade, particularly for British Columbia, nearly 1 million ounces of gold, all for the princely sum of about $10 million. We've acquired those properties. The projects have had over $30 million spent on them so far. So to some extent, we're getting these incredibly prospective projects and properties at a tremendous discount, really afforded to us by the difficult nature of current markets. So I'm incredibly excited about this. It's a massive set of properties, nearly 30 kilometres across by 20 kilometres north-south, in a tremendous location with resources. And what we do here at Vizsla Copper and our broader group Inventor Capital is we like to acquire projects as cheaply as we can that have resources on them already, so that the value is underpinned by the work that's been done and the resources that are already established. So this is a great way to play the copper market for us, and hence we did the transaction. It gives us a serious copper resource base, so that when copper prices do start to move, these opportunities, these projects will be re-rated in value. But the most important thing to my mind is the phenomenal exploration upside we have on the properties. As I mentioned, it's a transformational transaction for us. We're acquiring the projects at a $10 million valuation as a merger with the company. The team there at Consolidated Woodjam, Bill Morton and Glenn Garrett, have done a phenomenal job over the past years, keeping on the ground, advancing their projects. But we're here now to take it to the next stage. And the transaction will announce the closing of the transaction on the 13th of December. We've started doing a lot of exploration work, and we'll hit the ground running. The project, as I mentioned, it's an enormous area. You can see a map of Vancouver on the left overlaying the properties, or Manhattan Island. So you can tell there that it's a very, very large prospective area that we have under license as part of this transaction, and I'm very, very excited to get in and explore it. If you look at just zooming in onto the properties, as I say, there's already been quite a bit of exploration, and 5 porphyry copper gold mineralised centres have been identified so far. Some resources on those. We don't have resources stated for all of those projects and properties. So the work is fairly straightforward in that sense, to drill these things out and grow our resource base very rapidly from here. The great thing about being in this location, whilst it gets a little bit cold in winter, as you'd expect, we have year-round access, so we don't end up in any of those sort of doldrums where you can't get news flow out, because we do plan to be drilling year-round once we hit the ground after the closing of the transaction. And as the team says here, only a small fraction of this very, very prospective terrain has ever been explored, and typically where exploration has been done has resulted in a discovery, and that's very important. One of the things I love to talk about, and I learnt this at Rio Tinto, one of my early mentors, David Klingner, came up with, I think, what is the most optimal way of assessing exploration projects that I've ever seen, and that's summarised as size of the prize, cost of the test, and chance of success. Size of the prize. Okay, so to explain that, you want to be exploring for deposits that are large enough that they're economic. So the style of mineralisation has to be something that will become a mine. And we know in this district we're surrounded by Gibraltar and Mount Polly mines. So we know this district, this area, has the potential to deliver discoveries and deposits that will become mines. So that ticks that box in a major way. Cost of the test is very, very important. You want to be able to drill year round. You want to be able to access your properties cheaply, preferably without the use of helicopters or any other expensive means. And you don't want to have to drill too deep to get to the target, to the deposit. And again, here we've got outcropping copper and gold mineralisation. We've got year-round access, plenty of drilling companies nearby, and availability of drill rigs and labs and the like. So testing these targets is relatively cheaper than most other places on the planet today. And then chance of success. You want to be exploring in areas of known mineralisation or the terrains, geological terrains that have the potential to deliver discoveries. And what we do know here is that the little bit of exploration work that's been done over the past 15 years on these properties has delivered serious discoveries. So, these properties tick all three boxes very, very strongly. So we think that we're onto a real winner in terms of the projects here. And as I say, the value of the property and the value of the transaction is already underpinned by the resource base that's been established so far. And with some more work, I think we're going to see that resource base expand pretty quickly from here. The existing resource base, already significant. However, the exploration potential here is phenomenal. And you'll see here on this map some of the drilling that's been done on these anomalies. And you'll notice that these mag highs and IP highs here in red have been drilled out to some extent. However, there's still large areas where these haven't been thoroughly drilled out. And I think there's been a couple of rounds of drilling on these projects, but our knowledge is advancing all the time. And often you have better targets where you're in transition zones rather than simply drilling these geophysical IP highs. So there's plenty more work to do on these zones. And one of the things we've done recently is bring together our whole exploration team across all of our companies. At Inventor Capital, we've got 23 companies. 12 of those are listed. We've got a phenomenal group of geologists, award-winning geologists actually. Steve Blower is our VP Exploration here. Steve, myself, and a couple of the team from ISO Energy were awarded last week the AME BC Colin Spence Award for discovery. We discovered a deposit called the Hurricane Deposit for ISO Energy a few years ago. So Steve Blower, our VP Exploration here, is an award-winning geologist. And what I do know about my team is that if there is copper or gold or any other mineralisation for that matter on any of these properties, the guys will absolutely find it. So we're excited to get onto the ground and start exploring and drilling. One of the things that's interesting about this property, I suppose, Bill, Glenn and the team at Woodjam did a heck of a lot of work back around sort of 2010 to 2015 and had some tremendous exploration success. But because the market wasn't interested, a lot of this fell on deaf ears and I don't think has ever been really factored into the value of the company. And so you can see here drill holes that have probably not really been too well recognised by the market. I really think that we've got an absolute bargain here acquiring this company for around $10 million. To my mind, it should be worth many, many multiples of that already. And certainly when we get going and start alerting to the market to that fact, I think you're going to see strong share price moves because we have drill holes like this, 51 metres. In the southeast zone, 51 metres at 1.6% copper and 0.84 grams per tonne gold. Now, BC gets a little bit of a bad rap in that people talk about the low-grade nature of the deposits and porphyries here. But there you can see some absolutely phenomenal grades in some of these drill holes. And again, the market hasn't fully recognised some of this potential. So for us, very, very simple. Dust off this historic work, make sure that the market understands what we've already got here, and then start drilling around these holes and expanding the mineralisation both along strike and at depth. So fairly straightforward work program. This, to my mind, we've got a project here, a porphyry system here called the Deerhorn porphyry, and then the Megabuck porphyry just below it, just to the south of it. Again, more phenomenal drill results that have never been recognised by the market and never factored into Woodjam's share price. And you can see there, one of these drill holes hit 110 metres at 2.57 grams per tonne gold and 0.44% copper. Absolutely phenomenal grades, particularly for British Columbia, all very close to the surface. And this area, has never had a resource put on it and a resource around it. So again, the team's telling me that we've got phenomenal drill results. We've got excellent potential to follow those up, and a pretty straightforward task of getting in and drilling quite close to those holes and expanding that footprint of known mineralisation. So I think as we get going early in the new year and we start drilling again, you're going to see potentially some tremendous results as we expand those footprints of mineralisation and drill around known deposits. And then I mentioned the exploration upside. So whilst the little bit of exploration work that's been done has had a phenomenal return on work done. 5 porphyry systems of varying grades and qualities already found, and then a heck of a lot of other targets that are emerging. And one of the things that we do want to do when we hit the ground here in the coming months is a ZTEM survey across the entire property and just better define some of those targets and get in and start testing those. And who knows what you might have, but what we do know as we get in and test those targets, but what we do know is that it is a very, very fertile terrain with already proven copper and gold mineralisation, and we've got a slew of other targets to test. So I think we're going to be here for many, many years drilling these out, and the chances of finding the next big copper deposit are very, very strong in this area. Our other projects, I won't get into those. They're quite early stage. We are interested in bolting on other projects and acquisitions, but at the moment these Woodjam properties are very, very much our priority. They tick all the boxes in terms of exploration targets, as I mentioned there, and because we can operate year round, I think, and we've got historic results that we need to alert the market to and better explain to the market. You're going to see very, very strong news flow from us over the coming however many years, but certainly over the next 12 months. We've got a massive work program. We've got great access to capital. I think we closed the transaction with $3 million in the bank, but we've got great access to capital. And of course, being in British Columbia, we have access to flow through funding at a premium to share price, so relatively less dilutive funding. And so with good access to capital, a huge work program, phenomenal news flow, and I would expect that at some point next year we're going to be putting out some pretty interesting results into a market where the copper price quickly moves through $5 on its way to $15 a pound. So it's a perfect setup if you like the thesis for copper to play in the market. We're very, very cheap. We closed this transaction with a combined market cap of a bit under $20 million. Which for the pounds in the ground and the ounces of gold that we have up here at the Woodjam project is an extraordinary bargain. And I think, that this is certainly in my personal portfolio one of the very most exciting opportunities that we have in front of us. A little bit about the team. Chris Donaldson's our CEO. Chris and director. Chris has a tremendous track record, particularly in Western Western copper and gold, where he worked on one of these big porphyry systems. And so, we've got a great leader there. As I mentioned, Steve Blower, our VP Exploration, now award-winning AME BC Colin Spence award-winning geologist on the team. And I trust him with my life to make discoveries on these properties. So I'm excited to be working with Steve again. Keith Bodnachuk, our head of Corp Dev, did a phenomenal job of pulling this transaction together over the past year. So we've got a great group of people on the ground. And then in terms of our board, myself, a little bit more about myself. I'm the chairman and co-founder of Inventor Capital. I was a geologist with Rio Tinto for nearly 10 years. I, until recently, was the chairman of Skeena Resources, where we have the Eskay Creek project up in the Golden Triangle. So again, another phenomenal British Columbia-based mining project. I'm also a co-founder of EMR Capital, which is now one of the biggest private equity groups, and I remain a partner there. I think we've got 2.7 billion of cash and about 7 billion of assets under management there at EMR. And I was very fortunate to be a co-founder of NextGen Energy and ISO Energy, and was the CEO of ISO Energy until recently. So I really sort of cut my teeth on exploration and discovery, I think that the chances of us making another phenomenal discovery on these suite of properties is extremely high. Mike Connett is on the board. Mike's a co-founder of the company, of course, and has headed up Vizsla Silver, among other companies, and is fast becoming recognised as one of the movers and shakers in the space. Very importantly, Carleen Collier has been with us for years and is a safe pair of hands in guiding us through the listing processes and management of the company. And a special mention to Simon Smirlik, who is the COO of Ausenco Engineering. And Simon does a heck of a lot of work. He's probably built more mines than I've ever visited. So we've got a tremendous group of people behind the company there. So a couple of things. Copper market, we think, is going to be one of the great wealth creation opportunities that the planet's ever presented over the next 5 to 10 years. You need to put your foot on as many pounds of copper as you can, and that's what we've done with this Woodjam consolidated transaction. We've got great pounds in the ground already. We've got a team of phenomenal explorers and developers, so we're perfectly set up to capitalise on the opportunity, and a tremendous set of properties, the value of which is backstopped by the existing resources that we have there already, and a phenomenal amount of exploration upside, some of the likes of which I've rarely seen in my career. A little bit there quickly in the last minutes here on Inventor Capital. As I mentioned, we've got 12 listed companies, about 23 companies in total today, Vizsla Silver being the most prominent one. We love battery metals, and tin, of course, sits right in that theme. So take a look at Tin One Resources. I think we've got some of the very best tin deposits on the planet now in the company, and a number of other companies there. I must give special mention to Archer Exploration. Archer, we've acquired Wallbridge's nickel assets in Quebec and the Sudbury camp, and we have a serious nickel sulfide discovery in that suite of properties. And then Vita Carbon, again, we're expanding our interests in the battery metals and clean energy space, and that's what Vita Carbon does. So really, that's it for now. Thank you very, very much for listening. I see that there are a few questions here, so I'll answer those quickly in the last minutes. One of the questions: who are your mining neighbours at Woodjam? Well, of course, that massive Mount Poly project is owned by Imperial Metals. It's had some ups and downs in recent times, but suffice to say that project will benefit massively. And what it tells you is that this area is ripe for project development, copper project development. Another question here: what will be the current market cap of Vizsla after the acquisition? How much cash will you have? I think I answered that before, but it'll be about just under $20 million market cap, so very, very cheap for what we have, and $3 million in cash in the bank. And we've invested personally heavily into the company so far ourselves, and will continue to do so. And I think at Inventor Capital we have very good access to capital, so we're in good shape on that front. What are our key milestones for the next 12 months? Well, we've finished our initial exploration review with the broader team, and we're working on those targets. The next thing that we want to do is get more information back out into the market, alerting people to some of these phenomenal drill results that perhaps fell on deaf ears in recent times. And then at some point, as we move into the spring, hit the ground running with drill rigs, drilling, complete that large ZTEM survey over the property, but really start drilling around some of the known high-grade mineralised intercepts that we've had. So watch for very strong news flow over that time. Another question here: what is the ownership of Vizsla? Does Inventor typically own controlling stakes in the portfolio companies? We try and own as much of the companies ourselves as we possibly can. I and my partners always write very big checks for our companies and businesses. We put our money where our mouth is, and we pride ourselves in putting as much of that investor money into drill holes. Another question, when do you anticipate starting to drill? Look, I would say that it's probably sort of late spring, but in the meantime, the news flow will be very strong as we alert the market to what already exists there. So there you go, one way to play what will be a completely globally transformational opportunity and one of the greatest opportunities to create wealth personally that has ever existed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Eric.